Jakubowski draws some consequences from this in terms of what is the likely ideological vibe, if you want, of the middle classes, and he says there are a few things here, and I'll just kind of outline these for listeners, and we can see if we think there's anything to be drawn out of this, given that I think the two of you are maybe not as convinced as maybe some listeners might be by Jakubowski's. We will see. Alex is shaking his head.
Shadow audience, which you call in to support your point. Come on, man.
There will be. We will see. I mean, history will prove me right or wrong. I'm always
wrong,
prepared to put my faith in the listeners. I know you're not, but whatever. Anyway.
Milan ou Tripoli, Vilnius ou Benghazi, Paris, Moscou, on fait le bunga, bunga. Bangkok ou Bogota, Le Caire ou Jakarta, Gustavia, on fait le bunga, bunga. Stockholm ou Monaco, ou Montevideo, Oslo, Tokyo, on fait le bunga, bunga.
Hello, you, a member of the most intimate circle of BungerCast. This is the BungerCast Reading Club, otherwise known as the Thames Valley Reading Club, if you prefer. That's one for George and a very small number of listeners. Hello, everyone. This is the second of 4 episodes on the middle class, and I'll pass over to George in just a second. Hello, Phil.
Hi.
George.
Are you passing over to me now?
Yeah, well, but yeah, you can do what you know. Yeah.
Hi,
George.
I'm George.
Yeah.
I'm from Reading in Berkshire, and yes, Reading and reading is spelled the same. So I used to go to a reading festival when I was younger, which was Reading Festival, where they played music, and it wasn't. I think actually one
that became
band
less fun. The more you talk, the less funnier that became.
Yeah, it was funny just for about 5 seconds.
One band, I think it was Limp Bizkit, made that joke when they performed. So
they don't seem like a very reading sort of band, I would say.
Well, I don't know. Maybe they'll come back into fashion. Anyhow, I think we have a question on last month's episode, Alex.
Yes, we do. So, to remind you, or if you haven't had a chance to listen to that one yet, and you're listening to this one first, whatever, we're not going to say you have to listen to it in the right order. Although, I guess we've thought about the sequence. Right, we're doing this in a deliberate fashion. But anyway,
it could be like a Christopher Nolan film where it's like it doesn't really matter what the timeline of the things that you see. You just have to interpret it as to what the actual timeline of events are.
Right.
This is happening later, unless you're watching Tenet and you're thinking, or you've just seen that and you're thinking maybe we're going backwards in time. A spoiler for that.
So anyway, to deal with this memento that we have here received from Malto Malk. This concerns the last reading club, which was on Arno Myers, the lower middle class as a historical problem, in which we discuss such questions as, whether the lower middle class is still the main recipient of consumer culture, whether the lower middle class is a classless class, whether that condition has been universalized across society today, which is, I think, a point that we will come back to, I think, even today, looking over what George has for us in terms of questions. Right, so Malto Malk, G'day, bungas, he says. Sorry.
In his Brazilian, some kind of bend in the Amazonian River somewhere in the jungle of Brazil accent, is that?
Yeah. Somewhere halfway to Perth. Anyway, hearing Meyer's taxonomy of defining characteristics of the petite bourgeoisie, one that leapt out to me was the class's commitment to the social advancement of its children. I can see where Phil is coming from when he says that this surely applies to all classes at all times. But I think in the intervening decadent period since Meyer wrote the essay, which is to say, 4 decades since 1975, in the intervening period, this has been proved wrong. One of the most scathing critiques of the baby boomers and their legacy is that they are the rare generation that wantonly sabotages the economic welfare of its children. In the Australian version of this story, the upwardly mobile lower middle class boomers enjoyed affordable housing prices and free higher education. Then they pulled up the ladder behind them, rigging the tax system in their favor. Now they are either hoarding or pissing away their estates, while pessimism reigns and the birth rate plummets among the downwardly mobile younger generations. Insofar as this is true and not just millennial cope, this decadent trend refutes the idea that the petite bourgeoisie is motivated towards the social advancement of its young. Maybe Phil, you want to start? Otherwise, yeah.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I suppose I should, 2 points. I should firstly, I think, correct myself perhaps. I was a tad blasé, I think, with Mayo's point here.
No.
No.
Phil Blasé.
No,
I won't hear it. I will not hear it.
I know. Occasionally it does happen. And so even I must sometimes correct myself. So, but I get to correct myself. So, that is also a good thing.
Yeah, don't too much of that. You'll go blind.
Well,
But anyway,
yes.
go on.
So when he says, this fanatical lower middle class commitment to the social advancement of its children, obviously, he means something specific. He means the dedication to upward social mobility. Whereas, obviously, all parents who are reasonable parents, good parents want the best for their kids, but that's not necessarily understood to be realized through upward social mobility. So, if that is, I think, what was meant by social advancement, I think Mayer was right about that, and I was too quick to leap in as against him. But I don't. On this second thing, I think it is millennial cope. I'm afraid, I don't buy this, the boomers hoarding wealth and so on. I just can't see it. I mean, because they're long lived and they're a very large population cohort. So, by the logic of the fact, and they vote, kind of in very sharp distinction to the generations that came afterwards and many of the generations before, they are perhaps the greatest beneficiaries of universal suffrage across the sexes in that middle half of the 20th century. So I don't begrudge them exercising their democratic rights to imprint their interests on the system. And if you look at, the figures which show how many people in the UK rely on their parents to help them with a mortgage, it doesn't suggest to me that they're hoarding wealth, or keeping it. I mean, they're protecting their assets and they're beneficiaries of asset price inflation, sure, but they're acting rationally. And they're not hoarding wealth in the sense they're keeping it from their kids because they're helping their kids out. So obviously, systemically, it's an irrational asset price spiral. But it doesn't seem to me that that's something that's solved either on the individual level or on the level of a generation, in the sense of a particular population cohort. It's something that can only be solved politically, which is to say by building up, coalition, which will include cross-class interests as well as across generations. That's the only way to break it. So I think this is millennial cope.
So maybe one way to put it is that boomers are other people's parents, because the boomer helps
good.
the millennial. Okay. Maybe I shouldn't have explained that. Sometimes you just have an insight and you just leave it there.
No,
also,
but I think that's good. That's good. Boomers are that's really good, actually. Boomers are always other people's parents.
Yes, yeah,
there you go.
It's a really good line. And they're not, instead of maybe you hate your parents. I don't know. I certainly don't hate mine. So I mean, like you say, kind of these kinds of analyses are always other people's, like you say, other people's parents.
Well, one thing we should point listeners to our generation series as well, where because I think what Multimer is saying does capture something which a lot of people do think, or it's not a complete narrative that's plucked out of the air at all. So yeah, I think, and we explore that in more detail there. That's a plug for ourselves, aren't we so smart?
No, but you should listen to the Generation series if you haven't heard it yet. Came out a while ago. I think it's quite good. I don't know. There's good stuff in there.
Absolutely. And off the back of our half a millennial anniversary, 500 episodes, I would say it's one of the we did a couple of series, not many, but I think it's a standout of the episodes we did across the first 500. So I would definitely encourage listeners to revisit it.
Yes, celebrate our 5,000 episode year, Reich. 5,000, 5,000 episode Reich, whatever. Anyway, just one quick point actually on this, because, and which is very much to the point of this whole block of readings that we're doing over these 4 months regarding the middle class, which is, I think, the point about the class's commitment to social advancement of its children. I mean, I don't think that would even be undermined by the fact of that that the boomers enjoyed free education, and then younger generations are saddled with debt, as if that was like a kind of conscious policy of boomers, right? Or that it somehow, that it's their perfidy in some way to have enjoyed the benefits of the welfare state and of fast growth or something like that. In that regard, I mean, I totally agree with what Phil said. The point, I think, more specifically, is that it remains the case that the middle class, or the lower middle class, and there's obviously the boundaries are not entirely clear, but it's a class which invests particularly in education, puts huge emphasis on the education of its children, right, as a means of upward mobility. And that's different from traditionally from the bourgeoisie, from the upper middle class, from the upper class, whose interest is more maintaining their class position, accumulating wealth, and not rather than trying to climb upwards. And for the working class, for whom the possibilities of upward ascent are much more limited, right? And that plays its way out either in class struggle, or in fatalism, or in maybe a select few people trying to and succeeding climbing their way out, right? But that's the nature of a class stratified society. And I don't know if that has changed that much. In fact, what has changed, arguably, to an extent, is again a bit of a universalization of this lower middle class situation, in which the kind of emphasis on education to try to achieve upward social mobility, or even maintain your position, I think has had more emphasis is placed on it, and it's become ever more expensive to do so as well, right? I mean, the idea of that everybody pursue education is something which is, in most Western societies, has been sold as the solution across society, right? For the working class as well. I mean, dishonestly in many cases, but nevertheless, I think that's what's been sold. So I think, arguably, the Maltamok's question asks, is this now redundant? And I would say, actually, no, the opposite. That the kind of petty bourgeois attempt at upward social mobility is it's much more generalized today than it was in 1975.
Yeah, no, I think it's one of the things that came through in the last episode. Culturally, we're all lower middle class today. I wonder what other aspects we might also be all lower middle class. And I've just realised, so malto milk is that a pun on malted milk of some sort? Like Malk being the Simpsons milk, and malto being like Australian for malted. I don't know.
It's troubling, isn't it?
It's troubling because I don't understand. It's not a name. It's not. Maybe it is a name. Maybe their first name Malto, second name Malk. But that's each of their own, I guess. Anyhow, I should probably lead us into this month's discussion. Just to recap, Alex already touched on this, but what we discussed last time, I think some of Meyer's kind of conclusions, or the things which stuck with me, were, and this is from a historical analysis of the low middle class's historical problem, which of course is the title of the essay, is that this class is traditionally a politically vacillating class. It moves from one position to another, but is ultimately conservative or reactionary. Today, though, we discussed this, it's seemingly like actually a radical class. It's where a lot of the ideas, a lot of the kind of anti-system energy, particularly perhaps around environmentalism, seems to come from. And then this point that culturally we're all low middle class today. But we also, and I think this is just us patting ourselves on the back this episode, the terminology of the middle class is problematic, because that middle bit is the reference of the working class and the bourgeoisie don't exist in the same way. So whatever is middle between those two must be middle in a very different way. And maybe it can't be middle in the same way. So maybe using the word middle, which of course is what we titled this section of the reading club with, is not correct, or we could think of a different way to describe this group. And we're starting to move towards the idea that it's composite. There's some combination of independent producers and dependent clerks, or mangoes with two A's, or the PMC. And I think this is something else that we can sort of put these conclusions, or these thoughts in the context of the discussion this evening. And also made me think that we should do a future reading club about the ruling class. So what does the ruling class do when it rules? Goran Thurbon has an answer to that, but I won't say it because, you know, that would be giving listeners the shortcut answer. They need to listen to that reading club when we have it. So what are we discussing today? It's ideology and superstructure in historical materialism, a short section from that by Franz Jakubowski. So who is Franz Jakubowski? The listener may ask, particularly the listener who is too time pressed to go into www.google.com and type in the name and find out that way. So Jakubowski was a Hegelian Marxist born in Prussia in 1912, arrested by the Nazis in 1936 as a spokesman for the communists in Danzig. On his release, he went abroad and settled in the US and died in 1970. And Wikipedia has been pretty brutal to Jakubowski by saying history has not been kind to Jakubowski. His one contribution, i.e. his ideology and superstructure in historical materialism, is still read in certain small Marxist political currents and occasionally touches the fringes of academic study, for example, a brief review in the journal Radical Philosophy by British philosopher Kate Soper. And that's kind of it.
I'm very curious to know which Wikipedia contributor penned this scathing judgment, whether it is an academic or some participant in some of these.
You can look it up even.
Yeah, well, it would give you it never gives you a name. It gives you some kind of alias, I presume.
The Philippics? I mean...
You can always find
that's a good name, actually. That's a good name. Yeah, all right. That's
Alex
interesting.
_1989. I mean, there's lots of different ones it could be.
That's the sad end of history, Alex.
sad boy Alex. Yeah, so I think I come on in a little bit to why I wanted to read this. There's one particular insight in this which I just think is really interesting and want to discuss, and to read a whole book for one insight is overkill, so it's just a short section. But also, interestingly, I think at least in the edition that I have, there's an introduction from 1990 by Frank Furedi, which is essentially dedicated to a critique of what was then current analytical Marxism. So for listeners who don't know what analytical Marxism is, there's a lot of good books on this, but I think this introduction serves as a good critique by situating or by kind of talking about this idea of totality. Also in the Reading Club syllabus was Lukács, another Hegelian Marxist, and you do see Furedi bring some good examples of the analytical Marxists trying to, in this very kind of Poindexterist way, provide these kind of senior common room definitions and distinctions. It's all very like very precise and like, oh, no bullshit Marxism is what it was called at the time. And Furedi talks about a time when passive academic interpretations of Marxism are in the ascendant, and it makes me think, well, today things are bleaker, because I don't think we have passive academic interpretations of Marxism. I think we have anti-Marxist interpretations of Marxism today. But anyway, I think the reason why I wanted to just point this out is that this is essentially why this book, when I first read it, at least I thought it was so good, because you have this idea of the base and the superstructure, and these questions of what is, the whole question is what is in the base, what is in the superstructure, how do they relate to each other? And Furedi, in his introduction, and then Jakubowski more extendedly in the book, is like, well, actually, it's all about dialectics, man. And it's all about the relationships between these two interpenetrating. And it's actually, you have to think about totality. You can't just divide society up into arbitrary little bits, and one of these bits determines this, but in a constrained way or not, or it's a functional relationship. There's a lot of different ways to cut this in the analytical Marxist.
Model building Marxist, I think is referred to, right? You can build this thing, and you can put flowcharts, right? And you go, this changes this in such a quantity, it'll influence this, and it'll lead to, right? So you have falling profit rates, and it might lead to a change in the law, and that's how the base influences the superstructure, etc.
Yeah, even the most table defending thinker could not excuse flowcharts as a way to conceptualize dialectics. So right. So that's just a bit of the background. I just want to lay out a couple of things about, because we could talk all day about the argument of the book other than this bit specifically about the middle classes, but I want to just lay out a couple of things and then bring my learned friends in to discuss what Jakubowski thinks about the middle class. Is he right? Is he wrong? What does this mean if he's right?
Hello friends, you've reached the end of a sample from an episode only available to subscribers. We put out 2 episodes a month for free. For access to the rest in its entirety, please join us at patreon.com/BungerCast. For $7 a month, subscribers receive original, exclusive episodes with the entirety of the BungerCast cast. That's George Hoare, myself Alex Hochuli, and our contributing editors, Philip Cunliffe, Amber Lee Frost, Catherine Liu, Lee Jones, Alex Gurevich, and Lee Phillips. We've got extended interviews with guests, episodes on current affairs, and original episodes on theory, history, and culture, so as to understand the crises of our times. We also have the BungerCast Reading Club, where Phil, George, and myself present the key books and essays necessary for understanding the world today, how we got here, and where we might be going. Subscribers also get a digital subscription to Damage Magazine, with whom we're partnered, and you can find all this info at patreon.com/BungerCast. We do hope you'll join us. These are turbulent times, and ideologically confused ones as well. What we try to do is find political clarity, to move beyond the decadent age of Bunga Bunga.